Welcome, and it's so good that you are there. I wish I could see you. All I'm doing is looking into a camera here, and you're looking at me as if you're looking at me, but you're not really looking at me. You're looking at this incredible thing that was developed over the last several decades of the ability for us to, with a very inexpensive camera, instead of just many thousands of dollars for a camera, to stick it in front of a person and that have your basic laptop here. It could be an old backtop computer. I've used those before too. I got another monitor over here that'll help me with the slides and so on. But it's just incredible. Yeah, I got some lights that I bought there. I don't know, they're over a decade old, and I got this blue background behind me. I got a bunch of other backgrounds that I use from time to time. And I built this into what I call a studio. It's really just a room in an outbuilding that we call the barn. It's barn-shaped on our property at 7777 Churchville Road. I'm broadcasting to you today because this can make a significant difference for you. Now, I know that I won't have 2 million views on this view. My son-in-law, this past week or two, he is a junior high and middle school teacher, gym teacher, and he was working with some kids, and they caught this on video. He took a hook shot from, like, the logo, you'd say in basketball terms, and dropped it. And it got picked up, and it's had 2 million views plus. He used to be a good basketball player, but he's middle-aged now, so, he got lucky. Well, anyway, the next day, when the kids saw it, they said, do it again. He went back into the gym with them, and he hit the first shot again. Then they tried to make him take the second shot, and of course he missed. He should have quit while he was ahead. I know that there won't be 2 million views on this because it's not TikTok length. It's not a soundbite, but it's dead serious about what needs to happen in our world. We need a breakthrough in the church today. We are declining like crazy. We are repeating all the things that we've done before, some of which are good, some of which need to be rethought. But what we need to do is to get back to the very beginning and look at the foundational documents in the New Testament as to what a difference it can make. I say often to people, everyone wants a better life, and it doesn't matter who it is. Everybody wants a better life. And that better life is found in Jesus. And it's not found just because of the church. It's the vehicle is the church, but it's found in Jesus. And back in the 1870s, an old guy, a preacher from across the pond, he wrote this book, The Training of the 12, and often I have it with me and hold it up and show you, but you see it on the thumbnail as you come into the program. It's long since out of print, and there's reasons for that. It's not particularly written in a way that you would understand it unless you really like old-fashioned English. And I'm redoing that to help with people, and I'm going through it myself. I think probably the third time in my life, and I'm finding it much easier because I'm using artificial intelligence to help me upgrade the language. And I'm finding it helps me to refocus and think about what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I want to live to 100. I don't truly expect that I will, but I might. The advancements of health would indicate that there's a good chance I do. I'd like to be lucid and capable when I get that old, but I'm not in charge. I don't make those decisions. I do the best that I can do, and my times are in his hand. But here I am, 4/5 of the way through my life, and I want to continue to make a difference. And I believe that republishing this book, which is long since past its copyright, will be useful in the discipleship discussion going forward with people. Lots of people are putting out good materials on discipleship. My perception of it is one of two things. It's either oversimplified 13 lessons to get you on the discipleship track, or the 8 Habits of the Successful Person. I can't remember the exact title, but my friend Daryl Dash wrote that book, and it is a good book. But it's not that simple. And when you go back and you look at the New Testament and how Jesus trained the 12, you see some elements in there that we might be missing in our church today. And I will tell you that today we're going to hit one of those elements that's very much missing in our day, and it's been missing in many other days before as well. And you're going to see that there is an inflection point here for the disciples. And it is a magnificent story. It is the only miracle that Jesus performed that's recorded in all four Gospels. Do you know which one that is? Now, if you say the resurrection, now you missed it, because that wasn't a Jesus miracle. That was a God the Father miracle. Do you know which one it was? Well, we're going to find out. So let's dive in and see where we can go on this thing. Now, let me see if I can get these slide thing going. It's not easy when you're old to learn all this new technology, but I keep trying and I keep working on it. And I hope you'll stay with me to the end of this, because when I get done, you will see that you need to help others around you hit the reset button and think more deeply than they have been thinking. Well, this was a time of big events in Galilee. This is the first ministry of Jesus up in Galilee. It's recorded for us in all four Gospels. You'll know it because it's the chapter is the chapter on the feeding of the 5,000, and you're well aware of that. We're going to cover some detail on that. We're recapping what A.B. Bruce says, and quite honestly, when I put these PowerPoint presentations together, I'm not 100% sure that doing what A.B. Bruce did, although I use him as the starting point, and I do follow through on what he has said as best I can, but I think I threw some of my own stuff in there as well as I go along. But you'll be okay with me for that, I'm sure. Now, this is John chapter 6, which is the expanded version. Matthew, Mark, and Luke gave a more condensed version, and they didn't lock it in to what John said. No, wait, you guys missed it. By the time he wrote, it's highly likely that he had their sources in his hands, roughly speaking, 30 years after they'd written them. And he said, no, there's more to be told here. There's more to be told. And in this passage, they have a storm on the lake, and they have a sermon that Jesus preaches that we'll get to in Matthew, Mark, and Luke don't record this sermon. Only John records a sermon tied to this feeding of the 5,000 event. And it was a turning point for them because it was a test of their faith. Sadly, it was also a turning point in the wrong direction for many. We're going to get to that too. So where are we going here? We're at the Sea of Galilee. If you can imagine the picture of the Galilee, a circle up here, river down here, and that sea, you know the one, the Dead Sea. Jerusalem's down here. Jesus is working up near Capernaum and all the towns. Now in that neighborhood, there are all sorts of these towns. Think 1,000 people. It was very typical in the day, and most of those towns are gone, and they've been buried. And I just saw a video just today on one that has been uncovered that may well have been the original Bethsaida, and this was near Bethsaida. We're not sure which Bethsaida. There's a couple of Bethsaidas. This is an amazing dig. You can look it up. And if you look up Bethsaida, New Discovery or something like that on YouTube, you'll see a video of it. And you will see what is they were unearthing. Now, A.B. Bruce, when he wrote in the 1870s, he didn't have advantage of this. A lot of archaeological work has been done since, well, I don't know when they really started, but in earnest since the 1980s, where we learn more and more and more about these towns and villages. But you could think these clustering villages a few miles apart from each other, not one big megacity. Jerusalem was the megacity. These are all just villages, many of them fishing villages. And the people in a village, and it's very important for you to understand, they tend to know when you're in a small village, some of you are, a small village or town, you will tend to know or know of everybody in the town. And that was a key factor in the life of the work of Jesus. And he is, and the Gospels don't always put things in the same sequential order because sequence wasn't important to them. Thematic approach was a much more important thing for the Gospel writers. But this is probably, this chapter, these events come after, as they're indicated in the Gospels. Jesus has sent the people, he's multiplied his ministry, he's demonstrated some things, he's done some miracles, and he sent his 12 out. He sent the 70 out, to go to all these towns and villages and saturate them with his teaching and with his service. His service was in large measure in those days a healing service. Jesus was healing people through the disciples. This was big, big news everywhere. And they would have gossiped the news from town to town, from place to place, certainly from house to house within their own village. Did you see? Did you hear? And this was much, much bigger than going viral with a hook shot. You should see it. With a hook shot on YouTube. It was far more powerful than that because there would be, because people don't always get things right, there would be some mess ups. There was criticism of Jesus and what he was doing. Some people believed, some people didn't believe, and so on. But in this particular situation, it's near the Sea of Galilee, outside of a town called Bethsaida. Two main sites that are possible on there. We know because of what one of the Gospels says, it's a grassy area. Now these people, we don't know exactly why, all of a sudden they decided to congregate to follow Jesus at this time. If you watch The Chosen, and I am very much a big fan of The Chosen and how they interpret things and how they do things, they're working very hard to keep close to the Scripture. You see at one point they're handing out handbills that would have been handwritten. That's a stretch beyond what I think is reasonable. I wouldn't think they would have bothered. I think they'd just go and kind of knock on the door and talk to the people because they were tuned to learning their information, not from paper, because that papyrus, which it was written on, was rare because it was handwritten. So only important things, bills of sale and things like that, actually got reduced to writing in the days when Jesus was living and was circulating. So it was mouth to ear. And that's what was going on. So they gathered, whatever, a huge crowd of them. How many? Well, we know that there's 5,000 men, plus the women and children. That was kind of normal in public places for the men to eat over here and the women and the children to eat over there. So there was a common experience to separate them. So we don't know how many women and children there were, but with the 5,000 men, you got at least 5,000 women and children and probably 10,000. I think it's more like 15,000 were there because the families tend to have more than one child and so on. We just don't know. But we do know that it was many, many more than 5,000. So it wasn't the feeding of the 5,000. It was the feeding of the 10, 12, 14, 16,000. It was many, many more. It was the most amazing event, the only one that's recorded in all of Jesus' miracles. It's only recorded in all four Gospels. So that's the scene. And why are they coming? They're gathering from all these towns, walking perhaps a day's journey, although the nearby town might have been, an hour away, which was no big deal for them. Why? From their perspective, they've caught a vision of this new hero. And Jesus is saying stuff that nobody's ever said before. He's healing people, giving evidence that nobody's ever given before. And they're thinking, whoa, who is this masked man? Who is this wonderful new person? So they're looking for the new hero. And they're probably looking for some kind of a show because he's turned water into wine. He's healed people and he's done some magnificent things. He's about to do something that goes way beyond any of the individually oriented things that he has done so far into this group thing. So they're following the excitement. Think Taylor Swift coming to town. I don't know. By the time you watch this, if it's 3, 5, 10 years from now, and it's still out there, you might say, Taylor Swift, who is she? Well, to me, it was Elvis Presley back in the 60s. 50s and 60s, he showed up, and my older sister was an Elvis fan, and I learned some of the songs, like, since my baby left me, I found a new place to dwell. It's down the end of Lonely Street at Heartbreak Hotel. And everybody was swooning over Elvis, and some people still, get over it, people, move on. I'm not a Swiftie. I don't have anything to say about Taylor Swift, positive or negative. I don't have an opinion. I'm not here to be the judge of Elvis or Taylor Swift or the next person. Before my time, it was Frank Sinatra And I don't know who it was before then, maybe Rudy Valley. I don't know. Don't care. Because there will always be a new hero and people will always get excited about it. And I think we've got to deal with that propensity, that bent that humans have in the life of their church and not worry about the next hero. So what was the real reason that Jesus did this thing? Well, it wasn't about feeding these people. Now, he was being very courteous and gracious to provide food for these people. He was using it as an illustration of something much deeper. And John gives us that deeper story as he gives the discourse that Jesus gave about the bread of life. And that was controversial, more controversial than anything you could imagine in the news today. That went clash, his I am the bread of life statement and everything that followed from that really, really got the ire of the religious intelligentsia of the day. Jesus, why was he doing this? Well, he was testing the crowd, not because he didn't understand the crowd, because it tells us in John chapter 2 that, he had figured out what the crowd was like. He knew, but he also knew that the disciples didn't know. I don't think that maybe Bruce makes that point. I'd have to go over it again to see if he did. But I think that Jesus is testing the crowd to demonstrate to the 12 the illustration of what it's going to be like. Like, come on, people. He creates food out of nothing. It's incredible. And I think that the problem is that he's really just testing the crowd, demonstrating the crowd, his motives, exposing their false hopes, recognizing they were benefit-seeking. And even though they were benefit-seeking, he still met the needs of that benefit of the food that he gave them in that situation. But the reason ran far deeper than just feeding 5,000 people. So if you drill down, Jesus was looking at not the superficial needs, which were very real, very much human needs you can eat, but drilling down into the deep spiritual needs that take you beyond the grave. And in the process, the people are there. They've been hanging around for quite a while. And he said, what are we going to feed these people? Philip does the quick calculation and says, well, it takes us we can build the town. And Jesus already has in mind what he's going to do. Why? Because he somehow intuitively knew, and I don't think personally that this requires supernatural knowledge. He knew there was some kid who had thought ahead, good for that kid, and brought along some food for other people, barley loaves, think hamburger. Big loaves of bread, they were buns, and a couple of fish. And I eat raw fish, but if you can have sushi if you want. That's all they could see that was there available to them. And they said, but what is that amongst so many? They brought what they had. And again, back to Dallas Jenkins and The Chosen, and the new season is coming out shortly as I'm recording this. He says, it's not your job to feed the 5,000. It's your job to bring your 5 loaves and 2 fish. You are inadequate, just like me, just like everybody else. Get over it. Quit saying, well, I'm not gifted enough. Stop it. You've got what you've got, what God has given you. And I don't care if your intelligence is 85 or 185. The brain that you have is the one that you have. And it's the one that you can use. The words that come out of your mouth are the words that matter. There's an old saying, I don't know, was it attributed to Francis of Assisi? I'm not sure. Preach the gospel and when necessary, use words. No, it's always necessary to use words, but it's also always necessary to teach and serve people. It's both and. It's never one and then the other if necessary. Both are absolutely necessary. Jesus knew his plan. Jesus knew that this was the time for him to demonstrate supernatural ability beyond anything. And when you read John chapter 6, and please go read it, it'll take you much less time than watching this podcast will do. You will see that they're saying, thinks he's so smart, does it? I'm like, come on, people. What sign will you give us? Is one of the questions they ask. And I think, you want a sign? Just saw 1,000 people. fed from 5 loaves and another sign, you know what? If people want to have an excuse for not following Jesus, they'll think one up. And if you answer the one that they think up, they'll come up with another one. They always do. They always have. Get over it. Get used to it. That's the way it is. You're going to have to, with grief in your heart, move on until they are ready to respond. That's the way it was then. And that's what Jesus was illustrating for the disciples, that this isn't so easy. The results here, the crowds were all hyped up and excited, and they were voting for the king. What they thought of as king was not King Jesus as he describes himself and as the New Testament describes him. They're thinking of a king that's really powerful and put down all of the existing forces. They want to vote for the new guy. You know, governments get voted in, governments get voted out. The new guy always promises what he can't deliver. He might even be sincere in thinking he's delivered, but you've never had a government yet that could deliver on their promises. Sometimes they lie to you. Sometimes they tell the truth, but they don't understand the whole situation. But they know when they're promising that they're probably over-promising, and they'll likely underproduce. Well, they'll figure that out when they get elected. It's so important for us to not be people who overpromise and then underproduce. We're far better off to underpromise and then overproduce. So Jesus, they want to make Jesus king, and it tells us that he walked away and went up into the mountains. I think he left the 12 to do the cleanup. I don't know where they got their baskets to pick up the leftover fish and bread, but 12 baskets full. These were not little, like offering plates that you'd use in church. I mean, these were significant baskets. And they filled them up with the food. I think they were just in charge of the cleanup crew that day. And it was quite amazing for them because they knew where it started. They knew they had no food. And they knew that Jesus had produced this out of nothing. I don't know exactly when the miracle occurred. Did the miracle occur as they were divvying it up in groups of 150? And Andrew took maybe the basket that he had with maybe a piece of the fish and half a loaf of bread, and took it to the crowd, and he'd pull one out to give to somebody, and then he'd look in the basket and there was more there. I don't know when the miracle occurred. It doesn't tell us that, but we know that it did occur. It was very real. So I believe that Jesus left them there as he went off to ponder. And I think it's so important that we always take time to ponder what's going on in our lives and what's going on going forward. And I think that's one of the key things. I don't think Bruce makes this point. He does sometimes in the book, but he doesn't in this chapter. But it takes time for people to get saturated with a new idea and a new perspective. It's really, really hard to explain a digital watch to a Swiss watchmaker who thinks that all his intricate parts matter more, and you can buy a little digital thing for $2 now off of the internet that keeps time better than he ever could. And he's going to say, no, my watch is better. Yeah, but if the object here is to tell time, the digital watch is much more powerful than the Swiss time maker's watch. But, he's probably not going to give in to it because he'll always think his way is better. And that's what people will do. They'll say, hey, if my way doesn't work, I'll try Jesus' way. And you know what? Life comes and life goes, and they never come to Jesus. They've got to ponder this. You've got to ponder this as we go forward. The results of this whole event of the feeding was predictable from our perspective. Maybe not from the 12's perspective. I don't think so. And it's so sad. They were exposed to the truth, but all that came to the surface were their weak motives. They wanted their natural desires and needs filled first. When Jesus explained that the real need is the deeper need, fill it first and he will take care of the rest. He always said that. Now, this was a really serious test for them. It required to follow Jesus because he said, you're going to eat me, the bread of life. And it was really complicated and cloudy and hard for them to understand. And they could see that it was a super heavy commitment. It wasn't a matter of, free stuff? Okay, I'll take. The marketing world builds a life for us on the better stuff. And sometimes it's better and sometimes it's not. And sometimes they overpromise, and underproduce, whether it's underarm deodorant or a new kind of light bulb or a new kind of electric car, whatever it might be. They overpromise, and then at the end of the day, they often underproduce. And we get used to that. And people become skeptics. You've got to be a skeptic about all of this stuff. All the motivational stuff, these motivational speakers rise up and they fall. And you can get paid really big bucks to go out and do things to speak and motivate people. They'll pay you $10,000 a day to do speeches when your speech could have been done for free. But if they paid $10,000, they think they got $10,000 worth. And the reality is you could have watched the same thing on YouTube and got the same content, but you don't get the same buzz and the same hype. And we get used to this, I tried that and it doesn't work attitude more and more. The disciples needed to learn that they had to expect shallowness on the part of the people around them. So what? If we spend way too much time chasing the next shiny object, the red herring that somebody drops across our path. If I slow down, I can get it. But that church over there. Oh, that guru, he's different. That TV preacher, he's the real deal. Maybe, and maybe not. We look for the easy way, and there's no easy way. The point to me with the 12 and Jesus at the training of them, he put them together, and they had to travel together, and they had tasks together. They had to deal with finding their way, where to sleep, and the food for the day, and all those necessities of life, and the arguments as they walked on the way. When you do things together and you have a task, it builds relationships much more so than if all you do is talk about it. Now, I want you to drill down on that and think about that in your own life. Maybe a small group in your church. You sit around, you have wonderful times of fellowship, and you eat the dessert that you shouldn't eat, and you have the coffee that's the best coffee that was ever brewed, and you make friendships and so on, and you come back the next Thursday night for the next meeting, but you never do anything. And it's the service matched with the teaching that makes all the difference. It's the task, spending the time together and doing tasks together. That's why foxhole buddies are buddies for life. That's why people who win sports championships are buddies for life. They do the hard thing, and they do it together, and it may not be perfect, but they fight their way through it, and they score more points than the other team, and then they have the ring to wear for the rest of their life. And sadly, for some of them, they turn 40 years old, and their life more or less ends as they keep looking backwards. You've got to get together to work with people, to do things. And we got to expect that everything's not going to work well. There's going to be fallout. We've covered this in some of the other lessons. There's going to be fallout. Not all of the seeds are going to sprout, and those that sprout are going to sprout up, and you're going to get really excited about it, and some of them are going to wilt in the sun. That's the way it is. Ministry fallout is inevitable. We're facing an incredible degree of ministry fallout today. I was talking to a man last week who went through an evaluation to be a church starting pastor, and he said there were a dozen of them in the group that they started with, and I don't know, it was X number of years ago, and he's the only one left. And I know that our pastor in our church is working, and he's only got one or two who are his contemporaries from his years in Bible college a little over a decade ago that are still even interested in ministry. Many of them have fallen away. It's going to be a large measure of fallout, not as much fallout as we've had, in my opinion. I think that if we do things differently, like giving people this training in advance, that others around you are going to fall away, and they say, oh, that's what they promised me would happen, that they would fall away. And it's quite interesting that you have to examine yourself as you go to see where you're going. And somebody pointed out to me that it's John 6:66, verse 66, that says many of his disciples fell away. The word disciple is used. It's not, well, they were never disciples. No, for all intents and purposes, they appeared to be disciples. That John carefully uses the word disciple. They fell away. And Jesus then goes to the 12 and says, What you dice? And that's where they hit the turning point. And Peter, as the spokesman for the group, said, where else are we going to go, Jesus? You've got the words of eternal life based on words. It's not just actions. It is actions, but it's actions plus words. And you have to understand that people are going to fall away. So when you examine yourself, why are you following Jesus? No, seriously, why are you doing it? Just because your parents did? Just because it's a convenient social group, really, that you're in and it's comfortable to be there? Many people, over a generation ago, a journalist wrote a book called The Comfortable Pew, where he was looking at the church in North America that was declining. And these were people who were not ardent supporters of the exact words of the scripture. And he said, yeah, it's just comfortable. And we got a comfortable, well, it's not pews anymore, is it? But, those stacking chairs that we move around. And we made it all comfortable again. And it's never been the plan. And we're in decline because we're too comfortable. So if you're in ministry and you're saying, why are you following him? Is it for you? Or is it for him? You see, there's something to be said for narcissistic personalities getting attention, and it's really for their ego. They may take less of a paycheck to be in this as opposed to being the CEO of some company. But, people feed their egos, and it's just a bottomless pit. And it's really for themselves. Are you following him for results? And you say, well, I'm a failure because there's no results. Activity leads to results. It's not the calendar. It's, I'll give it another 6 months. That's not ever the answer. It's, I'll give it another 6 incidents in life, 6 times when I reach out to listen to a neighbor, to serve somebody who has a need, when I stop to talk to somebody on the street, when I reach out and maybe hand out a gospel tract to somebody. We used to do that a lot more than we do now. When I text somebody, when I show some interest in their life, when I don't come to them as a critic, but I come to them as a friend, and taking and creating the opportunity to share with them the wonders of the gospel and your motivation for life. And when you share it and it doesn't work, you say, I'm no good at this. I'm no good at talking to strangers. Nobody's good at talking to strangers when they're born. You have to learn it. It's a learned skill, and you can do it. And yes, if you're an introvert, it's probably the more difficult for you than for extroverts. I am wired fundamentally as an introvert. My wife will tell you that. Nobody believes this. You'll believe this as you're watching it, because you see this animated me. This wears me out, even talking to a camera, let alone talking to a group of people. But I'm still responsible as an introvert to reach out and talk to people. And I try to be the example of what Jesus wants me to be. So to be like Jesus, I got to teach and serve. Not one or the other, both and. And it's interesting in this passage, in around these events, Jesus takes off on 2 occasions. And he's taking off for refreshment. I think it's very important for us to have times of refreshment in our lives. And you don't feel guilty about refreshment. You can feel guilty about doing the wrong things during those times off, as it were. But it's very important for us to restore our own soul by maybe sitting by a river and reading a book, doing something that's not taking a huge amount of your effort to do it. Refreshment. I'm of the opinion that years ago that there was some debate about how much vacation I was getting. I think I was getting 3 weeks, and the church board decided I should get 4 weeks. And one of the seasoned guys says, no, with the Lord, a wonderful man. It's just as godly as could be. He said that if the pastor needed to have 4 weeks vacation, and he needed it, but perhaps the church needed him to be away for 4 weeks as well. And, I would argue that maybe 8 weeks is the right number. It's more than 4. I'm sure that if you have somebody who you're mentoring to bringing up in behind you, you've got to have planned absences where you push them beyond their comfort zone, where they have to do the speaking in public. Not like that's everything, but where they have to kind of carry the ball for a while, and you need to have planned absences to raise people up so that they really do what they ought to be doing in life. And the best way to do that is for you to be away. When I was a young pastor, I had a situation. Wendy and I were away for the weekend, and I apparently didn't tell somebody. And the pastor was on vacation, and we were away. I say the weekend. It wasn't really the weekend. It was maybe just Friday night and Saturday. And one of the deacons just had a heart attack and died in his 40s. And I got reamed out by the kind of the senior elder in the church because I hadn't made myself available. And where was I? Because he wanted me. I didn't know how to deal with a grieving widow. Nobody had ever taught me anything like that. But he thought because they were paying me that I should be the handsome sum of $75 a week. That's how long ago it was. That I should be there instead of him. And there's something really fundamentally wrong with that. And maybe I should have, and I disagree that he had a point to make. I should have let somebody know that we were not going to be available years way prior to cell phones. But, the situation was of such a nature that other people needed to do the ministering to that widow. I was just a 25-year-old kid, and here she was just distraught. And I did the best I could, and I perhaps I ministered and helped the people somewhat, but I needed that time away for refreshment. And so did Wendy. She was a school teacher at the time. I don't remember what we did or what we didn't do, but I do remember how much the pain I took in the abuse of that I wasn't there for the church. No, it's not about just the pastors. It's about everybody. You need to have good times of refreshment, but need to be there to serve people. Jesus was in it for the long haul. We've got to take the long view in life, and it's so important for us that as we walk this walk, that we carefully ponder regularly where we stand and what we're doing. Is there something we should set aside with our time in favor of doing something else? And recalibrate constantly. Jesus got away from them because they wanted to make him king, and he didn't want to deal with that aggravation. And the disciples went and found him, and they went on. And I'm sure that they had a lot of debriefing time for Jesus to explain things to him. You got to spend time with people. You won't have 12 at a time, but you got to spend time with 1 or 2 or 3 people. And maybe it's a Zoom meeting, maybe it's in person, whatever. But you got to be like Jesus and spend time with people. And this was a turning point in the lives of the disciples because they recognized miracles, shiny objects weren't going to get her done, but working with people will. Well, there you go. I hope that you have been blessed by that, and look forward to the time when 2 things come out. The training of the 12, redone, revised for the current generation. I'll have that done. I'm doing 1 chapter a week. By the end of this year, I'll have that done. But in the next month, approximately, I'm going this next Tuesday to get the photo taken with me and Richard for the back of the book. And we're just getting down to the fine strokes and doing some final wording on it. I think Breakthrough Pathways is going to be a fabulous book for you to help people get started. It's a starting level thing. What we're talking about today is more for you, but what we have in that book is for them as well. So hang in there. We'll be back, and I hope that I'll see you again next week.